Coming up on our newscast, President Yoon returns home after wrapping up a diplomacy tour, including the NATO summit and numerous meetings. He told reporters that the leaders of Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo agreed in principle to resume military security cooperation. Following a recent uptick in COVID-19 cases in the nation, authorities plan to set up more one-stop treatment centers. With more cases reported around the world, the WHO chief warns the pandemic is not over yet. China celebrates 25 years since the UK returned Hong Kong. President Xi Jinping claims the city-state achieved true democracy after the handover. Hello, hope you're wrapping up the week well. I'm Daniel Che here to bring the latest. Let's begin with our top story. President Yoon Suk-yeol is back in Seoul after wrapping up a diplomacy tour in Madrid. On the way back, the South Korean leader told reporters that he and his counterparts from Washington and Tokyo agreed on military security cooperation. Yoon Jung-min starts us off.
Three countries shore up security cooperation against North Korea's nuclear programs. Having met U.S. President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida for a three-way meeting on the sidelines of the NATO summit this week, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol signaled on his way back home moves towards trilateral security cooperation, part of which involves the military.
그리고 북핵 대응을 위해서 상당 기간 동안 중단됐던 어떤 군사적인 안보 협력 이런 부분들이 다시 재개가 되는 것이 바람직하다는 그런 원칙론에 저희가 합치를 봤다고 할 수 있습니다.
He added that at the NATO meeting, world leaders focused much on the war in Ukraine and North Korea's nuclear programs, and there have been calls for stern responses to the nuclear threat. When asked, he again dismissed concerns about a potential backlash from China over South Korea joining the summit.
어느 특정 국가를 배제하거나 이렇게 하는 것이 아니고 우리 국내에서든 또 국제 관계에서든 간에 우리가 보편적으로 추구해야 하는 가치와 국내 사회 규범이든 국제 관계에 있어서의 규범이든 다 함께 지켜야 되는.
On the Seoul-Tokyo relationship strained over historical issues, the president said the two nations should discuss pending issues and future-oriented cooperation all together at the same time. Much of Yoon's NATO trip also centered on economic security, exports, and arms sales. Promoting South Korea's nuclear energy to European leaders, whom he said were interested in nuclear power because of their carbon neutrality goals and the energy crisis triggered by the Ukraine war, this is how Yoon appealed to them.
그리고 저는 이렇게 설명했습니다. 우리 한국 원전이 세계에서 가장 값싸고 가장 안전하고 그리고 가장 신속하게 빠른 시일 내에 시공을 완료할 수 있다.
And not just that, the South Korean leader also asked them to support the country's bid to host the 2030 World Expo in the southern port city of Busan. Having wrapped up his three-day stay in Spain, President Yoon returned home on Friday. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
On the sidelines of the NATO summit, President Yoon has been promoting South Korea's exports. A key focal point was nuclear energy, a topic touched on during talks with his Polish counterpart. Jeong zooms in on the so-called sales diplomacy.
The first fruits of President Yoon Suk-yeol's sales diplomacy could be from Poland. Through bilateral meetings with world leaders in Spain on the NATO sidelines this week, President Yoon has been promoting the country's exports. Yoon has pledged to make South Korea a nuclear reactor superpower, and he used the NATO summit to discuss deals with his counterparts to export nuclear power plants.
First, we will go all out to win deals to build nuclear power plants in the countries that are about to choose contractors, including Poland and the Czech Republic.
During President Yoon's meeting with Polish President Andrzej Duda on Wednesday, Yoon emphasized Seoul's advanced and safe nuclear technology proven through the Baraka project in the United Arab Emirates. As part of this effort, South Korea's Industry Minister Lee Chang-yang also met on Thursday with his Polish counterpart. They signed a deal to form a joint committee and strengthen their cooperation on energy, including nuclear power, hydrogen, and e-mobility. Also at that meeting were officials from the two nations' major energy firms. 9 contracts were signed on nuclear energy between companies from the two countries, including South Korea's KEPCO and Poland's ILF. Earlier this week, during Lee's meeting with his Czech counterpart, 10 contracts were signed on nuclear energy and hydrogen between companies from the two countries, including the auto giant Hyundai Motor. One expert on nuclear energy says the projects in Poland and the Czech Republic could bring in billions of dollars to the South Korean economy.
Should South Korea export nuclear power plants to Europe, it could be deemed as the world's leading country in the field both in name and reality.
South Korea's industry minister plans to have another meeting on Friday local time with Poland's Minister for Economy with a view to expanding cooperation in various areas including batteries, natural gas, weapons, and related infrastructure. 엄지영, Arirang News.
The spread of COVID-19 has been subsiding in South Korea, but there's been an uptick recently, with the tally up about 2,000 from a week ago. Authorities plan to add more so-called one-stop treatment centers. Han Sung-woo brings the updates.
South Korea will increase the number of so-called one-stop COVID-19 treatment centers from just over 6,200 now to 10,000. The centers are facilities where people can get tested, receive in-person medical attention, and be prescribed antiviral drugs, all in one visit.
Even as COVID-19 case numbers rise, we will make sure patients can be treated in a stable manner under the nation's general medical system.
At a Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters briefing Friday morning, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo also vowed to better manage the nationwide distribution of hospital beds by installing joint response situation rooms and bringing up the recent uptick in COVID-19 cases after a 14-week downward trend. He cautioned against the threat of variant strains and reinfections. South Korea reported 9,528 new cases on Friday, 67 less than the day before, but around 2,300 more than last Friday's figure, raising concerns that another surge is on the horizon. There were 8 more related deaths, raising the death toll since the start of the pandemic to 24,555. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
The Director General of the WHO warns the COVID-19 pandemic is not over yet. Speaking Wednesday in a media briefing, he emphasized cases have increased in 110 countries.
This pandemic is changing, but it's not over. We have made progress, but it's not over.
According to the WHO, the number of infections around the world went up in the past week by 18%. The figures have been rising for the 3rd straight week. Dr. Tedros pointed out deaths have risen in 3 out of 6 WHO regions: Europe, Americas, and the Western Pacific. He mentioned in low-income countries, only 13% of people have been vaccinated. More than 12 billion vaccines have been reportedly distributed since they became available about 18 months ago. Seoul's Unification Ministry rejected a claim by Pyongyang that the regime's first COVID-19 infections came from the inter-Korean border. According to the North State media, the virus first spread in early April from Ipuri on the North Korean side of Gangwon-do province. They say a soldier and a young child found a peculiar object in the woods seeming to suggest a propaganda leaflet sent over the border on a balloon by activists. The Unification Ministry's deputy spokesperson explained that the leaflets were sent in late April, which would be weeks after the regime found its first infection. The sell-off continues in South Korea's stock market. On Friday, the benchmark KOSPI fell 0.17% to close at a little above 2305. It actually fell below 2300 around midday for the first time in 20 months. The tech-heavy Kosdaq plunged 2.14% to close at around 729. Foreign investors continue to be heavy sellers despite the relatively low valuations of local stocks, moving their capital to other assets as the dollar gains strength. South Korea saw its highest ever trade deficit in H1 despite logging record exports for the same period. Soaring energy prices were the main reason for the sharp uptick in imports. Shin Ha-young helps us look beyond the digits.
South Korea in the first 6 months of the year had its biggest trade deficit for the year's first half since 1997. According to the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, the trade deficit came to $10.3 billion, despite exports in the first half reaching an all-time high on a rebound in global demand. Exports came to around $350 billion, up 15.6% on year. There was an increase in shipments of goods in 14 major categories, the only exception being shipbuilding. The surge was led by semiconductors and petrochemicals. But all that was outweighed by the soaring cost of energy, which pushed imports up even more by about 26% to $361 billion.
The prices of oil, gas, and coal soared by $41 billion in the first half of the year, which drove the overall rise in the trade deficit. Other contributors were non-ferrous metals and steel, which rose by $3 billion.
An expert projects the country will continue to post a trade deficit for the rest of this year.
Right now, no one can really tell when the global inflation will end, but most analysts believe that the high prices will last until at least first half of next year. That means Korean trade deficit is likely to remain at a deficit until early next year or whenever the global inflation ends and the raw material prices start to fall.
In the meantime, the Trade Ministry says it's going to take measures to keep the momentum in exports going by improving regulations. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Data shows consumer spending online for activities outside the home recovered in May to pre-pandemic levels. According to Statistics Korea, with the end of social distancing, online spending overall rose to 17.3 trillion won, or about $13.4 billion, an increase of more than 10% on year. By category, spending on travel and transport doubled to the highest level since August 2019 at 1.6 trillion won, or about $1.25 billion. The culture sector rose to the highest level in 5 years, up more than 2.5-fold. Spending on food and beverages saw a 17% spike. Because people were dining out more, food delivery services saw their first decline in sales since 2017, down 4%. Inflation in countries using the euro has hit another record high. According to Eurostat, consumer prices surged 8.6% last month. Inflation is now at its highest level since 1997, when relevant records were first compiled. This comes as the European Central Bank prepares for its first rate hike in 11 years. The trend is mainly driven by soaring energy prices led by the prolonged war in Ukraine. Energy prices spiked almost 42% on year. At least 17 people have been killed and dozens wounded by Russian missile strike on Odessa. Moscow's troops left a strategic island in the Black Sea, claiming it's a gesture of goodwill. Pae-eun-ji has the latest.
Rescuers searched through the debris of a destroyed apartment building. 14 people were killed and 30 more injured by a Russian missile that struck a 9-story building near Ukraine's Odessa region. This footage released by the State Emergency Services of Ukraine shows the aftermath. The Ukrainian government said the missile struck at about 1 a.m. on Friday, which started fire in an adjacent storage building. Another Russian missile struck a resort facility nearby. According to the Odessa Regional Administration, it killed at least 3 people, including a child. Also, Russian troops have now left what's known as Snake Island, a strategically important island in the Black Sea. Known as Zmyny Island in Ukrainian, Russians had seized it on the first day of the invasion. In driving Russian troops away, Ukraine's armed forces said they had achieved their goal. But Russia claims this was done as a gesture of goodwill, so not to obstruct attempts from the United Nations to open a humanitarian corridor to allow grains to be shipped from Ukraine.
On the 30th June, as an act of goodwill, the Russian Federation Armed Forces have completed executing the tasks at hand on the Zemini Island and pulled out the remaining garrison.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Snake Island is now free, but said there was no guarantee that Russian troops will not come back.
It does not yet guarantee security. It does not yet ensure that the enemy will not come back. But this significantly limits the actions of the occupiers. Step by step, we will push them back from our sea, our land, and our sky.
Through the withdrawal, Russia may possibly loosen its grip on Ukraine's ports. 배은지, Arirang News.
China held the 25th anniversary ceremony of the British return of Hong Kong to Chinese rule. President Xi Jinping highlighted the city-state was able to achieve true democracy after the handover, when some countries noticed a contrasting trend in recent years. Choi Min-jung has the full story.
July 1st marks the 25th anniversary of the British handover of Hong Kong. Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered a keynote speech in the city on Friday to commemorate the anniversary. Xi said that Hong Kong has emerged from chaos and should work toward achieving greater stability and prosperity. He added that the city overcame many challenges like social unrest and the pandemic, but stressed that any element interfering with stability must be removed. President Xi also officiated the inauguration ceremony of Hong Kong's new chief executive, John Lee. For the next 5 years, Hong Kong is in the hands of a new leader.
I, John Lee, hereby swear I take up the role of Chief Executive of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Zone of the People's Republic of China.
Lee was Hong Kong's former security chief. He played a leading role during the crackdown against pro-democracy figures in 2019 and the implementation of the national security law in 2020, which many say has been used to crush opposition. Despite such political unrest, Xi claimed that true democracy began in Hong Kong ever since it had been handed over by the UK 25 years ago. He also pointed out that Hong Kong continues to maintain a high level of autonomy under the one country, two systems policy, which was granted in 1997 to ensure the city's sovereignty from China. However, many would disagree. Western countries like the UK have voiced concern as they believe much of Hong Kong's autonomy and freedom are now lost.
But on the 25th anniversary of the handover, we simply cannot avoid the fact that for some time now, Beijing has been failing to comply with its obligations. It's a state of affairs that threatens both the rights and freedoms of Hong Kongers and the continued progress and prosperity of their home.
Washington has also criticized China's Hong Kong policies. The U.S. National Security Council said in a statement Thursday that the world is witnessing a dismantling of Hong Kong's democratic institutions. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The U.S. Supreme Court has a new justice on the bench. President Biden's nominee was sworn in on Thursday. Ketanji Brown Jackson is the first black woman to serve on the post. Yi Xiu tells us more.
History was made on Thursday when Ketanji Brown Jackson became the first female black justice to be sworn into the United States Supreme Court. 51-year-old Jackson is the third black person, sixth woman, and 116th justice to serve on the court. President Biden nominated Jackson back in February, and the Senate confirmed her appointment in April on a 53-47 vote, with 3 Republicans joining the Democrats in support. Jackson replaces retiring liberal Justice Stephen Breyer, meaning the court's 6-3 conservative majority is unchanged. The swearing-in comes just 6 days after the court overturned the Roe v. Wade landmark decision, which had guaranteed abortion rights. Miami-raised Jackson graduated from Harvard University and Harvard Law School. She has worked as an assistant federal public defender and a commissioner of the United States Sentencing Commission. In 2013, she was confirmed as a U.S. District Judge for the District of Columbia under then-President Obama. One of her notable cases as a judge was where she ruled against the Trump administration policies that expand the categories of non-citizens who could be subject to expedited removal procedures. In 2021, she was appointed by President Biden to the U.S. Court of Appeals. Jackson will participate in her first cases when the Supreme Court's next term opens in October. A major case for the term concerns affirmative action, a policy which currently serves to increase enrollment of minority students at universities and colleges in the U.S. 이시후, Arirang News.
The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the Environmental Protection Agency, as part of the federal government, does not have the power to regulate greenhouse gas emissions under the Clean Air Act as it's currently written. The court ruled 6-3 with the conservative majority's opinion written by Chief Justice John Roberts. The decision also undermines the government's move to make the entire economy carbon neutral by 2050 and push climate legislation through Congress. In a statement, the White House said that President Biden would not relent in efforts to tackle climate change. Sustainability and ESG management are usually associated with large corporations, but public institutions and SMEs are also looking to improve environmental impact, social responsibility, and governance. Kim Bo-kyung sheds light on the developments.
ESG management means looking at the sustainability or ethical impact of an investment or firm based on environmental, social, and governance factors. E, for environmental sustainability. A company should do its activities to the extent which it can safeguard the environment. S, for social sustainability or responsibility. Supporting social issues in local communities and having good relationships with employees, suppliers, customers, and local communities. G, for governance. Strengthening transparency and pursuing diversity in leadership while being accountable to shareholders. ESG management has become a new paradigm for sustainability, and one expert says every organization and economic unit needs to apply this.
Local governments, public institutions, nations, households, and even individuals should do ESG management. Of course, large companies need to do it as soon as possible, since if they don't, they won't be able to get overseas investment or export their products. Yet, public institutions also need to follow this trend.
Arirang TV took a step of its own. It recently upgraded its cameras, lights, and mixing desks, and instead of throwing away the old equipment, it decided to donate it.
We had equipment that was outdated but could still be used. In terms of recycling, we looked for institutions or organizations that would use these. Seongbukgu office was trying to have its own broadcasting network for kids in a youth center, so we donated the items.
Using broadcasting equipment donated by Arirang TV, a small studio has been set up in Seongbukgu District's youth center. It enables students dreaming of working in media companies to experience what it feels like to work at a news network. This youth center is not the only venue benefiting from the second-hand gear. The National Library of Korea and National Archives of Korea also received some equipment to play old tapes and videos. Though tough, some small firms are also looking at ESG. This athleisure clothing brand focuses on pursuing zero waste by making small products using fabric that originally would have been disposed of. It also uses eco-friendly materials that are biodegradable, such as corn extract, which has the flexibility and durability due to its viscosity. To other medium and small-sized companies, she says there is nothing to be scared of.
Many reasons why CEOs are scared about it is because they think there needs to be a lot of investment, and without high sales, it would be hard to bear the cost. We thought that way too, but with many other partners, industries that have already paved the way, it was possible for us without using too much money.
Well begun is half done. Though the road might seem bumpy, all firms need to start thinking about community, society, and the environment. Once that leads to the first small decisions, it can grow into something that helps make our future more sustainable. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News. The heat wave is set to make a return this weekend. The capital region will be scorching hot with readings hovering near 33 to 34 degrees Celsius. Keep in mind that conditions will feel hotter than the actual readings due to the humid air. And almost the entire country is now under heat wave alerts. Most inland regions, including the capital, are currently under heat wave advisories. Being exposed to extreme heat may lead to illnesses, so make sure to stay indoors as much as possible. South Korea will be under the direct influence of Typhoon Eri early next week. While the projected pathway is subject to change, for now, Eri's forecast to reach waters off Jeju Island by next Tuesday. This will bring torrential downpours across southern parts of the country, so make sure to plan accordingly. For the readings tomorrow, morning lows in Seoul and Daejeon will be kicking off at 24 degrees Celsius. As for the daily highs, Seoul will be reaching 34 degrees, Daegu 36, Daejeon and Gwangju hit 35 degrees. The entire nation can expect another round of heavy showers next week. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That's all from us. As always, thank you for watching.